Tonight on Chim's Talk Africa, no matter how you look at it, you can't talk about the present development of modern Ghana without mentioning the contribution of the late President Jerry Rawlings. Tonight on Chim's Talk Africa, I talk with his eldest daughter, Dr. Zanetor Agyeman-Rawlings, and we look at the legacy of this man as well as the story of this woman tonight on Chim's Talk Africa. But before we do that, please like this video and leave a comment below. Let's know what you think. And don't forget to subscribe and click on the bell button and share this video with somebody else.
From Cape Town to Cairo and from Mogadishu to Dakar, this is Chim's Talk Africa. Here's your host, Chim Onyebilanma.
Hi there, welcome to this week's episode of your show. I'm Chim Onyebilanma, your host. Thank you so much for joining us. Like I said in the introduction, my guest today is Dr. Zanetor Agyeman-Rawlings. She's a Ghanaian medical doctor, a politician, as well as the eldest daughter of the very well-known former president of Ghana, President Jerry Rawlings. She joins me now via Zoom from Accra in Ghana. Zanetor, you're welcome to the show.
Thank you so very much.
It's so good to have you. Listen, I've admired your father, your late father. He died last year, President Rawlings, from afar because of the transformation that happened in Ghana. But tell me, what was it like growing up as a daughter of President Jerry Rawlings?
Well, it was interesting because both my parents are quite strict, and so it didn't feel like I was growing up in a bubble. You know, my parents ensured that my dad lived in the castle, which is the equivalent of the White House, I suppose, the presidential residence and offices at the same time, and we lived in a different side, not too far from the castle, but in a normal home, because my parents wanted us to be grounded. So I have three other siblings, and then there's myself. I'm the eldest, and the idea was not to grow up in an environment that gave one a feeling of having heirs or not having one's feet firmly planted on the ground. So it was very interesting, and I remember my dad always made sure that we didn't have any fancy cars picking us up from school or taking us to school. And I actually recall a couple of times when the car that picked me up from school broke down. He was adamant that I think part of the reason was before he took the reins of power, there was such an extent of the abuse of power and people related to those who were in leadership positions that he took a very strong position on ensuring that his family did not, as it were, ride on the back of the position he had to live in a certain ostentatious way. And he ensured that we felt that even as children. So he was strict. My mom was even stricter, and we went to normal schools, and we did not get preferential treatment at school. They ensured that if there was work to be done, for example, when I went to boarding school, we all had to do house chores, and sometimes you had to scrub the gutters or you had to scrub the toilets, and I got to do a lot of that. I actually started to wonder if I wasn't being made to do that more than some other people, but it was interesting because parents spent a lot of time going around the country, both my father and my mom, because my mother was working with the women, and they'd spend extended periods of time away from the house, and yet somehow managed to keep a tight grip on us at home. I still don't know how that worked, because I have three kids, and when I'm not in the house, I still wonder how they were able to maintain that feeling of still being there. It was an interesting experience, to say the least, but then I remember even in primary school, there were times when some of the kids in the class would be saying things about my dad, and I would have to endure it. I didn't know what at the time, my dad did not sit us down and say, well, this is exactly what happened, or that's what happened. So I would hear some of the children saying certain things, and it was quite difficult, hearing your mates, and this was even in primary school, pass really negative comments and not knowing what to say about it, and coming back home and trying to find out from my mother, what exactly the story was. To just have some clarity with regards to what people were saying. That I suppose it sums it up. There were positives and negatives, but overall, I think it was an interesting childhood.
Wow, your parents must have been true believers in the revolution they sought to bring.
Absolutely, and I remember there were a couple of times when my dad would come to the house, and he would walk into my sisters and I. We shared a bedroom at the time. My younger sister, and he would come and he'd open the wardrobe and he'd say, "Why do you need so many shoes? You don't need this many shoes." And it was a weird thing, because then whenever we'd hear him coming, my first reaction was, where can I move the shoes so that we don't have to hear that lecture again about how many shoes we had, which wasn't that many, but his point was he was so against the idea of excess. He felt that you did not need that much to be comfortable, and there was no need to go over the top. And I think it had an effect on me, because I still don't have enough shoes. My mother and my sisters complain that I need to invest a little bit more in shoes.
Zanetor, you were a born-again Christian. When did you give your life to Christ?
That would have been in 1993. I think it was July 18th, maybe, 1993, if I remember correctly. 18th or 22nd, it was one of those dates, I can't remember, but it was in July. I was in boarding school at the time. It's Wesley Girls High School. It's a Methodist school in the central region in Ghana, in Cape Coast. And this was the first time I was away from a home in this kind of environment, and it was a bit of a struggle at the time, and I think just being part of a Christian fellowship at the time helped me to cope quite well at the time. And that was when, we actually, it was a Christian fellowship, so the subject of, giving your life to Christ and talking about it and all of that came up, and that was basically how that ended, or began, as it were, because prior to that, I didn't really have an appreciation of, the best I had was the religious studies we did at school, which meant nothing to me. It was just another subject. So this was a more personal thing, and it took me down a journey of actually delving into the word and getting to read and understand things myself, and then just being more prayerful as well.
And what was your late father's reaction to when you got saved, and how did he react to it?
You know what? I don't even remember. I think he was the kind of person who gave a lot of room. It's funny because it didn't seem like he was that kind of person from a distance, but he gave a lot of room for one to express one's free will. And in my case, I don't think he really stood in my way on issues regarding choices that I made. And in every situation, the best he would do would be to offer counsel and say, well, if you take the left path, this is what will happen. And if you take the right path, this is what will happen. Just own the responsibility of the outcome based on your choices. And that was pretty much how we interacted most of my, adolescent and into my adult life, where he would not force me one way or the other. He would really just offer me counsel or guidance, and then, I guess pray or hope that I would pick the best path.
President Jerry Rawlings died last year, 2020, as his first daughter. What would you say is his legacy?
I think primarily the Fourth Republic, as we have it now in Ghana, the democracy that we have, that is his main legacy, because everything that he did basically ended up with the establishment of the Fourth Republic, and it has endured. This has been the longest lasting republic since our independence, and that is something worth celebrating. And if I'm here today as a second-term member of Parliament, if we have people who've been in Parliament for over 15 years, then that is part of his legacy, the fact that he established a system of governance that could allow a republic to endure as long as it has. And I would say that was also based on a few things. Some of the changes that were made, the ensuring that the armed forces were an integral part of nation building, and it's embedded in our constitution, where the president basically, in addition to ensuring that the armed forces, for example, are performing their constitutional mandate of protecting our territorial integrity, they can also be co-opted into nation building however the president sees fit, which is important because then it makes sure that you don't have this constant situation of this perception of the army or the armed forces being against, but rather being a part of nation building. The other thing as well is he's had a transgenerational effect, which I find quite amazing. He had this ability to relate to everyone in a way that made everyone feel special. And it didn't matter who they were. And I have benefited from that in many ways. During my 2 elections in the last few years, there were people who belonged strongly to the other party, the NPP, but who would actually say to me they were going to vote for me because they loved the way my father had conducted himself over the years, or they really respected how he related to people, or their mother had something positive to say about him, and so on and so forth. So as much as there's this broader aspect of his legacy with regards to the establishment of this republic, there's also the personal aspect that I can testify to with regards to how people's lives have been touched. He had a legacy that was also important with regards to his relatability to people and giving and caring about what happened. And it wasn't about him accumulating wealth or anything. It was really about how could he ensure that people had a dignified living, and he got involved. And in many ways, my style of leadership has been influenced by his way, and also about the way my mother went about things as well, with regards to being involved, getting the people who you are offering solutions to be a part of the thinking process and a part of the solution. And I think that is something that cannot be taken away. There's a whole list of things that I could name, but certainly all of those are parts of the foundation of the Fourth Republic that we now enjoy. And so I would say that is probably one of the biggest legacies to his name.
Zanetor, let's talk a bit about you. Your name, Zanetor, means in Ewe, it means darkness must stop. I would say that's like a prophecy over you. You already have your life work lined up for you to drive away darkness from Ghana and indeed from the whole of Africa. But tell us, what's the story behind that name, your name, Zanetor?
Well, at the time I was born, things were really bad in Ghana, and I guess for my father, this was symbolic. This was a name, and it was supposed to be something that would represent everything that he was feeling, that most people were feeling at the time, with regards to wanting there to be an end to the corruption and all the negativity and the emergence of something good, And so hence the name Zanetor, which means the darkness must stop, and the darkness being a euphemism for all things negative.
Zanetor, you are on record as saying several years ago that you would never go into politics, but rather you're going to concentrate on your humanitarian work that you were doing then. But in 2015, you ran for parliament in Ghana and you won. And then last year, 2020, you got re-elected again. Tell me, were there pressures that came on you that made you change your mind about following the political path of your parents?
Yes, in some ways. That was in 2015, and it taught me a lesson about being careful about saying never. Because as a matter of fact, it really was not my intention to go into politics. It was not my intention to run for office as a member of parliament. What I was doing, as I said, as you rightly pointed out at the time, was this issue to do with humanitarian work. And but ultimately, I did come under a bit of pressure from the party at the time. You know, there was a lot of pressure, and basically they said they'd done their groundwork, and the people wanted me to represent them, and it was a very difficult choice for me to make, because I had grown up with both my parents involved in politics, and I was privy to the negative aspect of things and what one has to endure with regards to sometimes the abuse and things, and I was not exactly keen on doing that. I was hoping to do what I could do from outside the establishment, but there was quite a lot of pressure, and I remember at one point the executives within this constituency and some elders approached my father, and I was asked to be in the meeting, and they told him to impress upon me the importance of taking up this role. So they really put a lot of pressure, and I remember my dad saying at the time that, well, he thought it was a good idea, but he couldn't force me. You know, that was a decision I was going to have to think about and take. But it was a difficult decision. I did pray about it. Because these are the types of decisions that change your path completely, and you can't back away from it. You can't rewind from a decision like this. And so this choice was not one that I made very easily, but eventually I said to God, I said, well, I'm not sure whether this journey is for me whether it's about the election, about me winning, or whether it's about the journey. But even if all it's about is the journey and not about winning in the end, I'm going to do my best to ensure that I can, support people, I can empower as many people and help to make a difference, if that is all it's about. And then, of course, I added a little caveat at the end. I was like, but God, if I'm doing this, don't let me be disgraced. But it was a tough one. It was a tough one. And I remember at the time my children, I have 3 daughters, and at the time my eldest was 9, the second was 6, and the third was about 3.5. So they were quite young, and it was a bit tough because I was doing very long hours. Sometimes I was lucky to see them in the mornings, and then I wouldn't see them in the night because I'd get home so late that they were asleep, and that was. I look back and I know that I missed out on, some aspects of their daily life, but I tried to make up for it on some weekends, and subsequently we've kind of caught up with it. But what I did was I had a good support structure. My mother was, around. My siblings were there. We had support for the children, and in the end, what I believed was if what I was doing was aligned with what God's will was, then my children would be fine, So I kind of went along with that. It was quite challenging because I'm sure, as you can imagine, not everybody was in support of what I was doing. And so there was a little bit of, there was a bumpy road as the process evolved, which it was really interesting because I tell people that coming into politics actually strengthened my faith in God, because you kind of get to a point where you realize that there are certain things that are completely out of your control. And you just have to find someone or something greater than what you can see and touch to hold on to for those times when things get really difficult. And that's how I did it, I suppose. Just spent a bit of time on my knees. Yeah.
Zanetor, you were telling me somewhere else that 6 years of being a politician, of being in politics, has exposed you to the deep-seated cancer of corruption and how much it is the reason for the lack of progress in society there in Ghana, around Africa. Has all of the things you've seen since you became a politician, has that dampened your idealism? Has that made you less of a believer? Do you still believe we can win this war against corruption and see Africa become what it's supposed to be, Ghana become what it's supposed to be?
It can be done. If I didn't think it could be done, I would not have run for a second term in Parliament. I do believe it can be done, but it takes political will. It takes the willingness of the leader to say, I'm not going to make exceptions, whether you're family, whether you're friends, or whether you're my party representatives. I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to make sure we straighten things out. And I believe, sometimes people say people tend to do this because they're hoping to win a second term. But I strongly believe that if you stand by what is right and you do what has to be done to clean up the system, the people will recognize the effort you've made. They will understand the value that you bring. They can see the change in their life, the positive changes in their life, and they will vote you back in.
Zanetor, what is your vision? What's God's been saying to you, a child of God? Do you see yourself one day running or becoming the president of Ghana?
Well, that's a tricky question, because I belong to a political party, and the process of selection of a flag bearer also involves the decision of the delegates, as we call them, which is the executives within the party. So that's a decision it's more of a dual decision, where if I choose to present myself as a nominee or as a candidate, it's also for the people to decide whether they would like to have me represent. So it's not a one-way decision. I'm not at that point yet, I would like to see how things evolve, but I certainly would not shy away from such a responsibility, because it's easy to stand on the sidelines and to criticize and complain. And if one can do that, one must also have the courage to stand in those shoes and be willing to do better.
Zanetor, as we wrap up, tell me, what's your last word to our viewers?
I would say that as people on the continent of Africa, we should not allow the artificial colonial barriers to divide us. And we must also not continue to be the source of raw materials for the world. We are capable of being totally self-sufficient and providing value-added products that the world will buy from us. We must stop looking from the outside in and pointing fingers at politicians. Let's get involved. If you do believe that you have the principles and you have the values that would make a difference to whichever country or whichever area you belong to, get involved. Get involved, because that's the only way we can truly make a change. It requires a critical mass, and that will only happen when we all stop sitting on the fence but get involved in the decision making at various levels in our country. And if I may use a story that I've just fallen in love with in the last year, the story of I think it was Nehemiah who built the wall. And he built it in just a few days. If I'm not mistaken, it was about 52 days or so.
2 days, yeah.
Yes, a wall that they tried to build for several years, and unsuccessfully so. And what did Nehemiah do? He was in a very comfortable job, by the way. He was in charge of the wine for the king of Persia. And when he was leaving, the king and the queen actually didn't want him to leave, and they offered him basically a multiple, visa back to the palace. But in going back, what he did was he got the what one would call the elite of the society at the time, the goldsmiths, the priests, the governors, the children of governors, and so on and so forth. And each of them was given a portion of the wall to rebuild. And so it was not, so to speak, as people like to say in politics, it wasn't the masses who rebuilt the wall. It was those who had been given opportunities, those who were privileged, were the ones who were responsible for building that wall, and they built it in record time. And so if you find yourself on the continent or outside of the continent, but of African origin, and you have been privileged enough to have the exposure, to have a great education, to have perhaps the wealth that others don't have, it makes you more responsible to rebuild this continent. Those who won our independence for us worked together and made it happen. It's our turn to work together to build this continent into what it should be.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I'll be speaking to Dr. Zanetor Agyeman-Rawlings, a Ghanaian medical doctor, politician, as well as the eldest daughter of the former president of Ghana, the late President Jerry Rawlings. Thank you so much for joining us today. Yeah, God bless you.
Amen. Thank you so very much.
Hi there and welcome back. This is where we'll say bye-bye this week. Thank you so much for joining us. And before we go, I just want to say that if this program has been a blessing to you, I want you to prayerfully consider becoming one of our partners. Our purpose, our vision is to continually use this program to serve as a catalyst to help believers everywhere in Africa to become the salt and light that Africa needs. And your gift will help us to continue to make this happen. The generosity of people like you is what continues to help us to use this medium to take this message to every nook and cranny of Africa. If you want to become a partner with us or you want to give now, use the contact on your screen and contact us today. And you get the information about how you can give from where you are. And to say thank you to you, I'd like to send you a copy of my book, God Gives His Children a Song. This is a book that has blessed people all around the world, and it's going to bless you as our means of saying thank you to you for giving to this ministry. Thank you so much for joining us this week. I'll see you same station, same time next week. Bye-bye for now. Please like this video and leave a comment below. Let's know what you think. And don't forget to subscribe and click on the bell button and share this video with somebody else.